Once two strangers climbed a rocky top looking for a moonshine.
Two strangers once scaled the summit in search of a moonshine. A 22-year-old country music star's career was abruptly halted in 1958 when he came in London with an unexpected partner. He was his cousin and was 13 years old. However, the most perverse scandals in country music did not start with child marriages. During live television, one celebrity lit an award on fire. Another lost millions after likening a president to Hitler. These superstars destroyed lives while hiding behind their instruments, engaging in bigamy and racism. The truth always finds a way out, even though the industry covered it up for decades. Cooley Spade. Spade Cooley was regarded as the king of Western swing during the height of his popularity. He even competed with Bob Wills to win over post-war country fans, packing ballrooms with thousands of seats. He dominated the nightlife in Los Angeles. He starred in over 50 westerns, and his TV program once attracted an incredible 75% of local viewers. His set was visited by celebrities including Gene Autry and Frank Sinatra. Additionally, Cooley had his own Hollywood star and was a billionaire by 1950. He was even designing Water Wonderland, an amusement park. However, on April 3, 1961, everything changed. Cooley's jealousy and paranoia flared that night. He frequently accused his 36-year-old second wife, Ella May, of being unfaithful. He was driven to violence by his obsession with the charges. That night, in a fit of wrath, he stripped, thrashed, and tortured Ella May while making his 14-year-old daughter, Melody, watch him do it. It was surprising how violent it was. In addition to breaking her ribs and smashing her skull, he also stomped on her, leaving her with over 70 injuries. To ensure she wouldn't wake up again, he burned her with his cigarette even after she had passed away. The house became a horrifying sight of a crime. Even seasoned officers shrank when they saw Ella May's naked and severely battered corpse. According to the autopsy, it was torture-induced murder. Cooley initially told police that she had slipped in the shower, but that account was refuted in court. The country was taken aback by Melody's revelation. She explained that her father had summoned her into the room to see what he had done to her mother. Cooley was found guilty of first-degree murder by torture in August 1961 and given a life sentence. He maintained an odd facade of respectability within. He was hailed as a model prisoner and started a prison band. He received an offer of parole after just 8 years. He was given a standing ovation when he performed a concert for police enforcement on November 23, 1969, while on temporary release. He passed away backstage a few minutes later after collapsing due to a heart attack. Like his crime, his demise was shocking. His legacy was one of terror rather than song and fame, as he became known as the man whose narrative went from acclaim to obituary in the same evening. Paycheck, Johnny. In country music, Johnny Paycheck's shooting inside the North High Lounge is remembered for all the wrong reasons. The date was December 19, 1985. He wasn't departing a concert audience or exiting a stage. He had just left a crazy Hells Angels party in Maryland, where the FBI was keeping a close eye out for a raid. He hurried back into the clubhouse to retrieve his 2 suitcases full of cash and his cache of Peruvian cocaine before he left. He drove restlessly and wiredly until he eventually pulled over at a pub in Hillsboro, Ohio, which is only 20 miles from his house. Paycheck's outlaw edge and anxiety, together with the narcotics he was taking, didn't help him when he found himself in the dimly lit lounge with locals Lloyd and Larry Wise. Lloyd Wise once offered turtle soup in what appeared to be a harmless way. Paycheck broke. He took out, say, .22 pistol and fired in a sudden fit of rage. Wise was spared death, but his hat was torn away as the bullet touched his scalp. He blew my cap off, Wise would later allege in court. He must have taken it personally. Everywhere the shooting made news. Stars throughout the country flocked to join him. Merle Haggard and George Jones contributed $50,000 to cover his bail. In order to pay for his legal fees, Jerry Lee Lewis even performed at benefit shows. Paycheck's assertion that he had acted in self-defense was not supported by the evidence. He was accused of tampering with evidence and aggravated assault after throwing away the gun. Judge Darrell Hoddle sentenced him to 9.5 years in jail on May 16, 1986. Due to the fact that he had used a firearm, almost all of it was required by Ohio law. As the punishment was delivered, Paycheck remained still, but the news rocked the country music industry. He got thousands of letters from fans all across the world in the 2 years that followed. His spirit was not taken away by prison. He worked as a teacher's assistant, completed high school, and made an effort to stay occupied. But the problems didn't stop there. He was forced into bankruptcy in 1990 after the IRS slammed him with a $1.06 million tax debt. His image as an outlaw only got more solid. His 1977 song, "Take This Job and Shove It," which now seemed to be the narrative of his own life, was still recognizable. The wounds persisted even after Governor Richard Celeste commuted his sentence after 22 months. Paycheck never left the shadow of what transpired in that pub, and the victim never forgot the night. David Allen. It's difficult to top David Allen Coe's life if you want to witness true anarchy in country music. He didn't only occasionally cause difficulties with his career. It seemed like a series of scandals. The majority of Nashville's vocalists occasionally broke the rules. Coe appeared intent on tearing them to shreds. He was only 9 years old when the trouble began. He had a history of violence and participated in violent talent competitions while incarcerated, spending time in and out of reform programs and jails. Rumors that he had slain another prisoner and even spent time on death row started to circulate as he grew older. Coe did not attempt to stifle the news, despite official documents indicating it never occurred. Actually, he expanded it on his website and in his own songs, allowing the myth to overshadow the reality. He didn't immediately enter Nashville's good graces after being permanently freed from prison in 1967. Rather, he parked a hearse outside the Ryman Auditorium, where he occasionally slept in the back and performed music on the street. Eventually, he signed a record deal and even wrote songs for other musicians, such as Shove It and the iconic Take This Job. Nevertheless, he appeared to be working against himself constantly. Coe put out 2 solo albums, Nothing Sacred, an underground album, in 1978 and 1982. There were so many offensive songs in both that no record label wanted to work with them. Particularly, the song NF was rife with homophobic and racist epithets. His songs are among the most obscene, racist, misogynistic, and homophobic songs ever recorded by a well-known songwriter, according to the New York Times and almost all other major media. Coe chose to lean into the wrath rather than back down. Years later, he sold the albums himself for $20 apiece, usually at concerts and in biker magazines. When pressed to defend the lyrics, he referred to them as satire and frequently cited Kerry Brown, his drummer, being black, but the harm had already done. The album became notorious and contributed to Coe's peculiar reputation while circulating underground for decades. It was not the end of his problems. He acknowledged not filing income taxes for at least 6 years in 2015. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and paid $980,000 in IRS fines and reparations for that error. Coe began requesting only cash for his live performances in order to prevent his money from being taken. While the IRS persisted in pursuing him, he gave at least 100 concerts annually. All things considered, it's obvious that no one in country music created a legend like David Allen Coe. He appeared to relish living out the story more the more surprising it was. Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't simply displaying incredible energy at the piano when he first appeared on the music scene. He was on the verge of establishing the norm for scandal in country and rock music. There was nothing that could have prepared the world for the shock of May 1958. When Lewis arrived in London for a 37-show tour, he was just 22 years old. A reporter saw a very young girl traveling with him at Heathrow Airport. She was announced as Lewis's bride and went by the name Myra Gale Brown. Everyone was taken aback by the truth. In addition to being his second cousin, Myra was just 13 years old and had recently graduated from 7th grade. Even worse, Lewis had not yet filed for divorce from his second marriage. The press in Britain went into overdrive. He was yelled at and jeered at by the crowds until he was ejected from the stage. After just 3 performances, his tour fell apart, costing him an estimated $200,000 in losses, a huge amount at the time. In a matter of days, radio stations ceased playing his songs, and venues declined to hire him. He was described in the press as anything from a criminal to a home wrecker. Lewis attempted to explain himself by claiming that these kinds of marriages were typical in Louisiana, where he was raised, but his career was not saved by that justification. When followers in the U.S. found out about the bigamy, in addition to the marriage, the anger intensified even more. They started to turn against the man who used to be known as the murderer. His sales plummeted from millions to nearly nothing. As more information became available, the scandal only grew more intense. Myra was Lewis's first cousin once removed, in addition to being a young bride. The media learned that he was still legally married to his former wife, Jane Mitchum, when the couple returned to the United States. Nevertheless, for 13 tumultuous years, Lewis and Myra remained together. Myra subsequently claimed that she endured every type of physical and psychological mistreatment conceivable during that period. She spoke of horrific, violent outbursts that were frequently caused by Lewis's rage and excessive drinking. Lewis didn't slow down in spite of the commotion. He got married 7 times over the years. The circumstances surrounding the deaths of 2 of his wives left more questions than answers. Eventually, Myra wrote a book about her experience, describing him as a dangerous child disguised as a man. His name is still associated with turmoil and scandal decades later, a level of notoriety that most musicians could never hope to achieve. Hank Williams Jr. Before Hank Williams Jr. blew up his own career on live television, no one anticipated that primetime football would devolve into mayhem. The hosts were surprised into silence when the country music singer, who everyone dubbed Bocephus, appeared on Fox and Friends on October 3, 2011. When questioned about President Obama and House Speaker John Boehner playing golf together, Hank likened it to Hitler and Netanyahu playing golf together. As he continued labeling Obama and Biden the enemy, the anchors froze. ESPN, with whom he had been working since 1989, released his well-known Monday Night Football theme tune in a single day. The abrupt sound of a scratched record in a cacophonous bar marked its conclusion. Hank wasn't the kind to say sorry. He doubled down while networks and companies frantically tried to find sponsors. He attacked ESPN on his own website, saying he left of his own volition. According to his writing, the network had violated the First Amendment. The argument rapidly went viral on the internet, with irate supporters standing up for him and detractors accusing him of being careless. Even his song Keep the Change, which was directed against Obama and the networks, had over 180,000 downloads in just 2 days. According to The Opinion, he even labeled Mickey Mouse cruel and claimed to have no remorse. In front of a sizable crowd at the Iowa State Fair the following year, he went even farther and claimed that the populace despised the Muslim president of the United States, who detested farming, the military, and the nation. Scandal wasn't a consequence of Hank's career. It was propelled forward by the fuel. Concerts turned into events when his Bocephus moniker was sewn on Confederate flags, which were proudly flown. If the South Would Have Won was frequently on his set lists, along with other songs that expressed Southern pride and threats. During a hot summer performance in 2015, he threw homophobic epithets from the stage while fans stood in rebel flag capes. The mood became even more intense as each phrase was greeted with applause. Hank remained focused on his core audience despite every storm. He took advantage of every cultural conflict, always grinning to show that he had no intention of stopping. He was considered the outlaw king of country music by his most ardent supporters. He was viewed by his detractors as the mastermind of the noisiest circus in the business, Charlie Rich. The audience was prepared for the night's most significant event when the Country Music Association Awards peaked in 1975. The announcement of the Entertainer of the Year award was imminent. Charlie Rich, known as the Silver Fox, he took the stage once more after winning the title the previous year. However, something didn't feel right. His voice was weighed down by more than just nerves, and he lacked balance. He was still taking painkillers for a broken foot and had spent the entire evening sipping gin and tonics. Although the audience sensed something out of the ordinary, nobody realized how bizarre the occasion was going to get. Rather than keeping things straightforward, Rich took a detour. Some of the nominees' wives shifted uneasily in their chairs as a result of his awkward jokes and even his flirtation with Loretta Lynn. He talked endlessly about the challenging year he had just finished and brought up a trip to London. As everyone waited for him to eventually open the envelope, the suspense increased. He gently lit the winner's card on fire after taking out a lighter. He held it out and said, "Mr. John Denver, my friend." They were taken aback. As the ashes fell, the room was filled with gasps. Denver was not even present when it took place. Unaware that his big moment had been accompanied by a blast of flames, he accepted his prize via satellite from Los Angeles. Rich appeared to be making fun of Denver, a vocalist who some believed was too pop-friendly and polished for traditional country music. The reaction was instantaneous. Rich never received another invitation to the CMA Awards. Sales of his songs plummeted as soon as they were taken off the air. Rich's son then clarified that his father had no intention of offending Denver. It was only a joke that went horribly wrong, he claimed. However, the harm had already been done. In one startling instance, Charlie Rich, a man who had pushed boundaries by fusing pop, jazz, blues, and country music, had set a fire that ultimately destroyed his own career. He made a lasting impression on country music. Wagoner. Under the strong TV lights, Porter Wagoner was well known for his glistening rhinestone costumes. However, he was perhaps more well known behind the scenes for the control he attempted to maintain. Dolly Parton, the young vocalist who joined his act in 1967, was the source of his most significant conflict. They were once one of Nashville's most well-liked groups thanks to their duets. The developing tension between them was not visible to the public. By 1974, their relationship had deteriorated to the point where Dolly penned, "I Will Always Love You" as a farewell note. The resulting split was anything but peaceful, despite the song's tenderness. Wagoner filed a $3 million lawsuit against her in 1979, alleging that she had breached their agreement and owed him 15% of her future earnings and royalties, potentially for the remainder of her career. He claimed in court that he was entitled to the money since he had turned her into a celebrity. Throughout the months-long legal battle, tabloids ran stories about betrayal and backstabbing. Dolly ultimately consented to give him about $1 million spread over a number of years. She later acknowledged that he received the first $1 million she ever made, which she referred to as the price of peace. The financial difficulties weren't the only ones. According to Dolly and those close to her, Wagoner frequently behaved like a man who desired total authority. She characterized him as a male chauvinist who rarely acknowledged her independence and attempted to direct every aspect of her job. He said she was unreliable and would even abandon her own family if it benefited her job in sour interviews he conducted long after she had left. It was clear from his statements that he did not want to see her move on. Without him, the harm went beyond their private feud. Wagoner's personal financial situation and career started to deteriorate. He invested heavily in restaurants, made bad business choices, and lavished money on his ostentatious lifestyle. He was forced to sell several of his cherished rhinestone suits, which had once served as a symbol of his wealth, at auction after going bankrupt in the middle of the 1980s. For a man who used to dominate the Grand Ole Opry stage, it was a devastating fall. Porter Wagoner's legacy is ultimately recalled for both his music and the acrimonious altercation with Dolly Parton that exposed the darker aspects of his career. George Jones, one of the few celebrities whose personal lives occasionally overshadowed their music, was George Jones. By the late 1970s, his reputation for disruption had nearly eclipsed his voice in popularity, and not necessarily in the best way. He was known as No Show Jones because he skipped 54 shows in 1979 alone. Despite the fact that there was no assurance he would show up, fans nonetheless paid the $13.50 ticket fee, which is almost $50 today. Some people arrived expecting to lose their money. In the meantime, promoters began putting money aside for refunds and even made jokes about betting on whether Jones would even go on stage. His career was about to end, and the only thing that saved him from going completely missing was the enormous popularity of his 1980 hit song, He Stopped Loving Her Today. Jones's shenanigans, however, extended well beyond his show-skipping. Surely his wife tried to prevent him from drinking in the late 1960s by concealing all of the car keys inside the home before they left. She believed she had him trapped, but the family's John Deere riding mower was outside with the key still in the ignition, and it was illuminated by a security light. As resolute as ever, Jones mounted the mower and proceeded to drive it all the way to Beaumont, Texas, to the booze store. It was 8 miles, according to some. Others maintained that it was 16. In any case, it took him almost 3 hours to finish the trip, creeping along at only 5 miles per hour. He acknowledged years later that nothing could keep him from drinking. Things had gotten considerably worse by 1982. Jones had just won Male Vocalist of the Year for the second consecutive year from the Country Music Association. However, he was stopped by authorities shortly after on I-65 south of Nashville. He was operating a Cadillac while intoxicated and swerving along the highway. There was a half-empty Jack Daniels bottle on the passenger seat, and the car's registration plate wasn't authentic. Possum 3 is scribbled on a piece of cardboard, a reference to his moniker. Jones reacted violently, attempting to kick the TV cameraman who had come to document the arrest before he was taken away. He told the police, "Take me to jail. I'm drunk," after failing his sobriety test. He alternated between laughing and yelling in the holding cell. The storm that followed him around was perfectly captured in the image. His legend seemed to continue to develop despite his time in alcohol and drug treatment, which included a hospital stay in Mississippi following a major accident. Buck Owens was the quintessential country star. On stage, he enchanted millions of people with his glittering outfits and broad smile. However, the man behind the guitar was not at all like the amiable person he presented to the public once the cameras stopped rolling. Those who worked with him later spoke of a fear-filled environment. Former band members said in Eileen Sisk's 2010 biography that Owens would degrade and humiliate anyone who disagreed with him. Some said that they were afraid to talk to him at all. He had complete control over his environment and frequently reprimanded or fired anyone who didn't live up to his expectations. His decisions were always based on money. Owens occasionally paid his band members just $100 per week, even at the height of his fame when his performances brought in millions of dollars. It wasn't easy to leave either. Quitting musicians frequently ended up on a blacklist in Bakersfield and beyond. Those who stayed said they had to be on guard because they never knew when Owens would snap. Roy Clark, his well-known co-host on Hey Ha Ha, previously said that working with him was like always being afraid of his next tantrum. His brutality extended beyond the office. Owens was also abusive in his personal life, according to testimony that Sisk was able to find. While he persisted in portraying himself to the world as a loving family guy, wives and girlfriends spoke of violent outbursts of jealous wrath. When he believed that rivals couldn't be silenced by words alone, he even went so far as to involve the FBI. Nobody was able to dispute his success, though. Owens amassed an estimated $100 million empire by the time of his death in 2006. In addition to owning radio and television stations, investing in cattle ranches, and controlling lucrative publication rights, he had 21 #1 hits. He took pride in being a shrewd businessman and was well known for billing his own band for food and stage props. But he was not at peace with all that wealth. He became increasingly solitary in his senior years. Buddy Allen Owens, his son, subsequently acknowledged that as he grew older, his father's staunch independence frequently left him feeling alone. Owens himself made no effort to conceal the truth. "I was a bastard on wheels," he admitted in interview after interview. In a more direct statement, his biographer claimed that Owens could purchase nearly anything in life with the exception of a contented mind. Young Farron. The songs that made Farron Young famous weren't the only part of his journey. Additionally, it was about a wild streak that stunned Nashville's most resilient citizens. A buzzing audience gazed in astonishment at a concert in Clarksburg, West Virginia in 1972. Young spanked an 18-year-old fan after dragging her onto the stage. He was retaliating because she had spat at him. His actions were so egregious that he was jailed, fined $24, and assessed additional court fees of $11. The notorious reputation was further enhanced by the swiftly spreading news. The hillbilly heartthrob, sometimes known as Young, was not only noted for his songs. His unexpected, inebriated outbursts were a source of worry. He occasionally lost his anger with waitresses, reporters, and even his own bandmates. His darkest periods were frequently driven by barbiturates and bourbon. He once urinated all over a hotel hallway carpet, laughing as he said he had christened the motel in celebration of the band's tour stop, according to his biographer Diane Diekman. At times, his rage became even more intense. He shot a pistol into his Tennessee home ceiling in 1984 when intoxicated and enraged. His 32-year marriage broke down at that very time. His story's most eerie moment occurred in December 1996. Young felt abandoned by the Nashville business he had once helped shape, and he was alone, despondent, and weak from emphysema and illness. He grabbed a .38 pistol one morning and shot himself. He was not immediately killed. He was discovered alive in bed by a longtime bandmate. However, at the age of 64, he died the following day at Summit Medical Center. His suicide note was heartbreaking and succinct. He placed the blame on his deteriorating health and what he described as his career's demise. He expressed his belief that he had been left behind by the industry. One last connection to the rebellious spirit of old country music was left when his ashes were thrown over Old Hickory Lake at Johnny and June Carter Cash's house after his passing.